Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the call today. We have Chris Neeb, the president of Franchise Evolution Partners. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
Well, Chris, I would love to transition to some insights, maybe even some action items, and just get your wisdom in the franchise industry. But before we start, let's just take a second and explain what your company does for franchisors.
Absolutely. So when we started the company back in 2019, our goal was to come in and acquire franchisors. We are part of a family office based here in Denver, Colorado. And that was 100% the goal. We were going to acquire companies, help them grow, and then flip them. We've just seen it be super successful in franchising, as all of us have. And so it was an opportunity for us that we wanted to go after. And what happened is, as we started going down that process, we just had numbers that didn't match up, companies that weren't the right fit. They would find out who our investors were and they'd want a bigger number, which every founder has every right to want and go after. And we decided to go ahead and reverse engineer this and go ahead and come in and sell for a brand first and foremost, and then turn around and then look for investment opportunities. So we're in the franchise sales organization space, but we use sales as an opportunity to go ahead and look for investments into franchisors.
Right. Which is very smart because then you get to know everything you need to know about them and you actually you know what it's like versus what you're being told it's like.
I mean, you see if they pay their bills on time, you see if their franchisees like them, you see if they've got good validation, bad validation, you see how their team interacts with things. And so you're right, we see it all. It's fun to be able to go that path first and foremost. But we could have a brand for 3 months and say these guys got it. We could have a brand for 3 years and say, gosh, we got to figure out how to put some money behind some of these guys, because some companies want to have that opportunity and a lot don't, which is good. And they've got every right to kind of decide how they want to grow their business, which is great.
Well, knowing that we're having a conversation around that is going to be listened to by franchisors, maybe some franchisees or other people, but what do you think is the most important thing we could talk about today?
I think the biggest one that we see a lot of is processes. Do they have a process? And that could be a sales process or education process, if you don't want to say the word sales process, a process to support their franchisees as they build and grow their business, and then ultimately what an exit could look like. And that could be on the franchisor side or the franchisee side. So the one thing we really dig into up front is, what are your processes? How are you going to support your franchisees, get them open, and then more importantly, make sure that they're successful? You want to make sure these guys are making money. And that at the end of the day, happy franchisees cures everything. And so sales takes care of itself, operations takes care of itself then, and then ultimately they're profitable, which then helps for what an exit process could look like for a franchisor if that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, well, if they don't have good processes, then it almost seems like the way to keep funded is to sell more franchisees, which exacerbates the problems, when really your customer is the existing franchisee, not the next franchisee. That will actually make things just roll smoother. And
And we see that, right? I mean, it's you just paid a bunch of money for an FDD, you just paid a bunch of money for a new fancy website, and you hope you got nice pictures and videos. But if it's about that next franchisee that comes in to keep the lights on, well, what about the guy who just gave you a check, a week ago or a month ago or a year ago? Are they building a big business? Are you supporting them? And you hate to admit it, we've seen it all. We've seen it to where it's, gosh, if you can fog up a mirror and write a check, you're a franchisee. And that's hard not to take when you're a new franchisor, because you just want to grow and you don't know what you don't know yet. And what we tend to see is those first, call it 10 to 15 franchisees, they're buying into you. They're buying your vision. They're buying what your goals were to grow this business. They may not be the right fit. And that's hard to say no up front, but sometimes saying no up front is better in the long run.
what do you see as the kind of growth milestones in number of units, like, 10 units, 20 units? Like, how do you break it down?
The royalty sufficiency is always the goal, right? How much do we need to bring in royalties so we're paying all of our bills? And based
Mhm.
on the industry and based on what an average unit volume could look like, or just go right to what a royalty payment could come in, how many locations do you have to get to where all your bills are paid? We've seen that number based on industry be, anywhere from 70 to 100 franchisees. So is it, you're going to run it lean and mean for the first 20 that you sell, So then that means that you're cook line, bottle washer, all the above, and you're doing all the work to help those franchisees get their businesses open. So it's bringing on franchisees to get to 20. And then from 20 to typically up to 40 or 50, that's where you're hiring a bigger team. You might have a VP of operations, a VP of support. You might have a new CFO in place. So I kind of look at it as in the first 20 becomes typically the founder doing everything they can do to slowly start to build their team. 20 to 50, you're hiring a bunch of people to support those franchisees. And then 50 plus is where you have a pretty decent sized team in place because you're getting to the promised lands of getting to that 70 to 100 that are typically what you're looking for to get opened.
Hmm. Have you noticed, like I've seen, what do you think it is around 20% of people have an item 19?
We're seeing that more. I get nervous if they don't. I think that you should. If you don't, I wonder why you don't. Why are you hiding your numbers? That's the scary
Yeah,
part.
that's the big concern because people buying into a business, I mean, they're trying to get a return, and for some of them, like that's their life savings, and if they're jumping into it, like it's sink or swim, and so not having numbers and being told to just validate with franchisees, it my first reaction is if the numbers were better, they would proudly wear them on an item 19. If the numbers are
Yeah.
mediocre, they might be hiding them. And then they'll say, well, my lawyer says we shouldn't. And it's like, what's your thoughts on all that?
I think that you've proven out a business model and you've gone ahead and made an investment into a disclosure document. I would tend to think that if your numbers are good and someone's going to buy into your business, you should show them what they can potentially make. And there's so many different ways to do an item 19. You could show top line revenue. You could work your way down and go all the way down to bottom line revenue. You could, get very creative with the P&L to say, here's the major expenses minus these different expenses. So I don't disagree. I think that if they're not willing to put an item 19 in place, it makes you a little nervous when you're looking at a brand because let's say they have one franchisee or they don't have any franchisees. How are they going to know how to build and grow their business? And go back to the food mentality. Did they get on an airplane, they tasted the food, and they saw a bunch of customers and they had a gut feeling that this could work well? Well, sure, but does a gut feeling pay your bills, right? So I get a little anxious when they do not have an item 19. I understand why some franchisors would not, but it's hard to go find franchisees for someone if somebody doesn't know how much money can you make in a business.
Yeah, I've even seen them use corporate location and then
Mm-hmm.
back out the estimated royalties based upon that as an example, just
Yep.
showing corporate information.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
It's
What
hard with attorneys too, right? Because they're really smart at what they do. We all need them for all the right reasons. But when somebody says don't put an item 19 together, well, they've got a track record. I mean, go back to the Korean barbecue concept that you and I've talked about in the past. Great corporate facilities, great numbers. And we literally had to do that. We said, here's corporate numbers and let's minus out royalties, ad fees, et cetera, just so somebody could see what that ultimately looks like. And the return is still amazing. So to me, you kind of question though, well, why isn't there an item 19? Does that raise a red flag? Because sometimes it can. And so you start to identify what's the best way for someone to learn those numbers. And building pro formas is dangerous. I mean, there's a lot of lawsuits out there right now for people who are building pro formas without an item 19 or even against their item 19. So you've got to be a little cautious in how you do it to make sure it's the right fit. But more importantly, to understand why aren't they giving you the information to help you make an informed decision.
One of the big things that people have trouble with when I ask about differentiation and being unique, there's got to be something that just lets people know how you're different so that if there's lots of people doing the same thing, they can tell, or something that's so novel that it just draws people to you. What do you think it is if you were to kind of describe what it is that makes a company stand out or unique versus just saying they're unique?
Well, go to the end user, the customer of that franchisee, right? So when you have a franchisor that like literally almost teaches their franchisees that the customer, I hate to say the customer is always right because we know that's not the case, but they almost treat that franchisee as though they're the customer. And then the franchisee can focus on their end user, their customer. Customers are what's going to drive revenue. That customer experience is what's going to drive revenue. So the franchisors who really focus in on that customer experience, we could use frozen yogurt as an example. How many frozen yogurt places popped up and then went away? And as bad as this sounds, was that vanilla really different than the same gummy bear that was on top of in a different cup? Probably not. But if they had a great customer experience, That's what kept people coming back more and more and more again. You see the same thing with restaurants. What's that customer experience look like? Gyms. How's that fitness concept working? Higher end retail. If it's a swim school or a salon concept, like with Salons by JC, what makes them different than all the other brands that are out there? And it's ultimately that customer experience, who's the one handing cash over or credit card, that the franchisors that focus on what that experience is are the ones that are growing bigger businesses faster.
Yep. And if you're just in business, but it really isn't you're not able to differentiate, or it doesn't seem to stand out or hold your attention much, it doesn't have the customer grab, which isn't going to help the franchisee.
It's not. I mean, go back to that. I mean, it's all about that customer experience and the need for them coming back, right? I mean, tree business. My tree could fall down, but I need another tree, right? And then was it hard to get an arborist or a company over to do it? Because if I'm not getting somebody, I'm going to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So if there's a good customer experience, I think all of us follow that, and we can go past COVID and what we all went through there. But I think the customer experience is so incredibly important right now. And if they're willing to give you more and more of their cash or their credit cards, that's what you're looking for.
Hmm. Yeah, that was the same thing. I first learned about Salons by JC. I was just like,
Mhm.
so what's unique about this company? And as I went through it, I really learned how it was different, and I was very impressed by it. And I've definitely done quite a few territory checks on that specific brand over
Yeah.
the years, just because I mean, the history and the numbers, the financials are incredible, but also how they run the business model. It's just
Yeah.
different.
It really
Yeah,
is. They have that concierge sitting at the front, so the franchisee is not there. They don't want them there.
right.
Just built a great. They've got to go back to processes. They've got great processes to identify a franchisee, great processes to get open, and great processes post opening to fill a location. So they've done a very good job at making sure ultimately their customer, their franchisee, is making money, and then their customer for the franchisee is the individuals renting space are busy month over month over month so they can continue to pay their rent payments. So they've done a really good job with their business model.
When I see a bunch of young brands, I usually have to warn people, okay, listen, if you're talking with a young brand, they don't have the structure in place, so they're probably just going to want to get on the phone and talk to you and then say, sound good? Here's an FDD. Let's talk in a couple weeks.
Yep.
And but when you talk with an established brand, they're going to have like an organized sales process that might have some webinars, economics calls, training calls. They'll have a where they want to meet you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what What's kind of what you consider an effective process so that people can get an idea of what that would
Yeah.
look like?
I think you got to go into what we've seen. I'll keep comparing a young restaurant concept and I'll use Save Splash as an example, very established brand. So with the younger concept, we do build a lot of processes in place to teach people about the concept, about their real estate, about their food, about what it's going to be like to operate a business. But to that point, when we have a discovery date, it's okay, time to taste the food. Let's see what the experience is like. Let's see if people are actually coming and going from the restaurant or restaurants, which is very helpful. But you've also still got to build a business because even though we have awarded a bunch of franchises, they're all in construction. So there's not going to be a lot of validation. So what we've been able to do with that founder who loves to be on an airplane is he'll get on an airplane and go meet with the candidate. So he's going to take that step to go ahead and go out there and meet people in their market, potentially look at different areas and different sites, which is a big time commitment. But he's trying to find those right franchisees, which most franchisors at young stages will not do. Whereas we flip that coin over or swing that pendulum all the way to the other side, Save Splash, very well established. We had a discovery day literally yesterday with and every department service and booking and real estate and construction and ongoing support and marketing, they just have a bigger team. And that's just because they've been around longer and they just had a more defined sales process in place to identify if it's the right fit for someone to buy into their business or not. So you'll see it all over the board. You'll see franchisors that are young that are just will do what it takes to get on an airplane and go make it happen. Whereas with more established brands, they'll have more department heads as part of a discovery day, more part of a discovery process because they can.
Yeah, and I've seen like if you have more leads or more opportunities, you can do more marketing, but when you have less, you really have to switch to sales. And what you're saying is, with that younger brand, he's willing to step out and meet face to face. He's qualifying them, but also, I mean, if you're meeting the founder of the company face to face, that's pretty enticing. I just think that would get your attention.
It
the
shows you
great
commitment,
company.
right? I mean, he's on the Food Network all the time. We joke around about how we can tell when there's a rerun on Diners, Dive-In and Dives, Drive-In and Dives, whatever it's called. And all of a sudden, you'll see a large amount of people come through because they're very interested in the concept. It doesn't mean they all become owners, because that's absolutely not the case. But he wants to build the foundation of franchisees. And so sometimes it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more money to do it. But if a founder is willing to do that for you up front, and then ultimately continue to come into the field or people into the field from his team as he's been growing it, it just shows you commitment. It really does. Because he needs it to work. I mean, that's a big piece for a younger brand. Do what it takes to make it work.
Right. What do you think, like, for lead sources for companies? Because that's going to change. Do you use, like, look, you're talking to people differently or sourcing people differently depending on brands? Like, how do people determine what would be the right place to find the candidates for their kind of company?
So it's a budget response, right? And so the International Franchise Association right now says it typically costs anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 to acquire one franchisee. Now you're seeing that number go up just because people are spending a little bit more money, or people are becoming a little bit more sophisticated, and the number of buyers a little bit harder to find right now. So that might go $12,000 to $15,000. So if you're looking for one a month, let's go to the high side. Plan on spending $15,000 a month in marketing. That can be social media, which is big, LinkedIn, which is big, Google, which is big. But you're competing with a lot of franchisors, a lot of franchise consulting groups that are out there looking for the same type of candidate to identify, helping them find a business. And then ultimately working with franchise consulting groups, right? I mean, you can't just say, I want to work with you, and then here's a contract and we're going to go. They've got to be the right fit, right? And you've got to do validation from your side to ultimately work with franchisors. So it's one of those, it's expensive to build and grow, but you've got to anticipate being able to spend some money to get there. And ultimately, you can sell to friends and family all day long, but sooner or later, you've got to start, putting some money behind this to grow your business faster, to acquire franchisees, because you can do both. You can work organically on your own with different marketing tools, or you can work with franchise consulting groups. We have brands that do both because they want franchisees open. So they're willing to do those things.
What do you think is the minimum amount of capital that somebody needs to have on hand when they're like, you know what, I want to convert this concept I have into a franchise? Because I think that a lot of people come in either a little underprepared financially, they have
Mhm.
higher expectations, or they invest their money incorrectly in the beginning and they run themselves dry, you know?
That tends to be the worst part of our industry. And let's just call it for what it is. If somebody comes in undercapitalized, or you hate this, and it's happened to all of us, where you hire the wrong people and they're just really expensive and they don't deliver the results you're looking for. So we can go back to IFA type of numbers, and some of the things that we all continue to hear about. If you're not anticipating between $400,000 to $500,000 to launch your brand, it's going to be tough. I mean, we average FDD right now is between $35,000 and $50,000 with an attorney. Can it be lower or higher? Yeah. Operations manuals, putting the right marketing in place, the right systems in place, and having capital available to you. Can you do it for $200,000, $250,000? You can, but you're really bootstrapping yourself. So a lot of what we look into when we talk to these younger brands is, do you have the time frame and the appetite and the capacity / capital to spend to get to that point? So I tell people $400,000 to $500,000. And can that be scary? Absolutely, it is, and it can be. And it's making sure that they're in position to be successful, build an established, good, solid brand to support franchisees.
Right. And it's going to be, if you're trying to get it on that that smaller number, then you should probably plan that you're going to have what do you say? Your concept has to be really unique and really have gravity that pulls people to it. Because if you don't really
Yeah.
have that differentiator, that where people are drawn to want to buy and own a franchise and drawn to want to do business at the franchise locations, you're just going to be slugging more marketing, to try to get it off the ground.
I mean, that's really it. So go back to selling a franchise to pay your bills, selling your franchise to get to that next one, to get to the next one, to get to the next one. It's a successful model. Does it work that way? Yes. But do you make some decisions and some poor decisions based on trying to get that franchise fee? And you will. And so we've seen lots of franchisors do it that way and become successful, but the ones that can take a deep breath and make the right decisions up front to turn somebody down if they're not the right fit, it's going to happen that way. We all like to tell funny stories. We had a discovery day 2 weeks ago with a Korean concept that we work with, and husband was 100% all in. The wife was falling asleep in the boardroom, like literally falling asleep. And it was one of those, well, you could sell a franchise. And Joe was able to come back and say, why would I sell a franchise to a family where the wife is literally falling asleep multiple times during presentations with our team? That's embarrassing. And so we ultimately turned down the deal, which was a smart move on his part. And could he use another franchisor or franchisee as a young franchisor? Sure, he could have. But to be able to make those calls up front, and it's a story that we'll all laugh about forever. Like, gosh, remember when that lady fell asleep in a discovery day? It's kind of a fun one, but it happened, and he was able to make the decision on, I don't want them as franchisees. And nobody from our team could have predicted that, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that happens. So
I know there's certain situations where I bring in some espressos with me
yeah,
if I'm gonna have to sit. That might help.
I literally just shook my head. It was like, we see a lot in franchising, and that was definitely a first. Hopefully a last, right? But I mean, I was more, and this is fun to say, I was proud of him to not just say, go ahead and sell him a franchise. It was like, we're probably not the right fit. And then it's that, fear of loss. Well, why can't I have this? Well, your wife was sleeping and you kept waking her up. Like, how are we let you guys invest, a bunch of money into a business if she doesn't even want to be here? So
Yeah. You're
just
gonna
little
be
things
on
like
your
that.
own. That's
Yeah,
just saying he's gonna be on his own, you know, for sure. Um,
absolutely.
What are a few things that you think really choke brands' productivity? We're trying to get this business off the ground, and you have the whole process, of either you have the sales process, but you also have the training process, and then once they're open, that additional support. But there's maybe some choke points that people don't realize that they need to prepare for.
So I think the key in all three of those buckets would be marketing. If they're not willing to spend money on marketing to identify franchisees in whatever capacity, that's going to be tough. If they're not willing to spend money on marketing to ultimately get these guys open for grand opening campaigns, how are they going to find customers? Post opening, if they're not willing to spend money, franchisees not willing to spend money to bring in customers, that's always an issue. So there was an old saying back in the day when businesses were failing, and it could be a gym as a great example. Well, what are you doing for marketing? Well, the first thing people tend to cut out is their marketing. Well, we've got customers here. Let's just do what we can to keep them happy. Well, no, you need new customers to come in to raise that bottom line. So I think marketing falls into all of those buckets that if they're not willing to spend, they're not going to see customers. So that could be, again, franchisees, current franchisees, potential franchisees. Then once they're open, they got to spend. They got to spend to get customers. They really do.
Right. And when it comes to somebody who's looking at it, an engagement,
Mhm.
because some people go dark on you. They might be good people, they might have their reasons. But if you're not able to reach them in a way that connects with these people, it might be that they're not the right person, but sometimes they are. What are some things that you have found when people are just kind of like disengaged? Because it just
Mhm.
shows me that they're not interested enough, or maybe life got busy. But what are some engagement things that you found that help?
So I'm a big actions person. They could tell you they read it, they could tell you that they're in a good spot. Their actions are going to teach you everything you need to know about these people. So we spend a lot of time building a rapport with candidates. We need to know who they are, who their kids are, what life items could come up and get in the way of your decision. And those are hard questions to ask, because if they're saying all the right stuff and they're, telling you they're doing all the right stuff, it's hard to not think that they're the greatest people out there, but they miss a phone call. They don't fill out an NDA. They don't send an FDD receipt. Small little pieces in the process start showing you, are they engaged or are they not? And so if you base your process on actions, you're spending your time on the people that want to move forward with things. And I was trained at a very, very young, early age, because I was not process oriented. I was probably the worst salesperson ever to work with, years and years ago, because I was just like, oh, they're saying all the right stuff, but they weren't doing all the right stuff. And it just helps you identify, spend your time on the people who are showing you that they're interested and they're showing you they want to own a business and potentially your business, versus the ones who are saying all the right stuff, but they're not doing all the right stuff. So it's that get to a know as quickly as you possibly can, so you can focus your efforts on the individuals that are starting to say yes. and their actions are going to show you that in the process itself.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've told people, listen, I appreciate what you're saying, but I can't hear your words through your actions. I said,
Mm-hmm.
actions mean everything. You can say anything, but actions is where your head at. It shows what's important to you.
I mean, we
Uh,
see it all the time. You've seen this a lot. If people are moving through the process and they're doing what you're asking them to do, they're making the phone calls, they're on time, they're ready for you, they're good. Whereas we had this happen with one of our sales directors the other day. Makes her phone call, guy said all the right stuff. His financials looked great, but he was running another business. And no, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. But that's not fair. They're not going to learn about a business when you're doing 10 other things. And we literally said, close the file. Didn't hear from the guy again, which is fine. I mean, it's hard every now and then, but actions are going to show you exactly how serious these guys are about their business and potential
yep.
business.
Right. And I've had to say that to clients like, listen, you're going to be expected as somebody who's looking to be a business owner to act like a business owner. And
Mm-hmm.
so you need to be able to show up for meetings, schedule meetings, be prepared for meetings, respond. If you're not responding and you're not following up with people or you miss meetings, you look more like an employee that doesn't have their act together than a
Mm-hmm.
business owner. And so you're going to need to make sure you do that. And I have those conversations with people. And then if I have to follow up, I'm like, "Hey, looks bad. Doesn't look like a business owner. I understand you got stuff going on, but what happens when you're in business and these same situations happen,
Mm-hmm.
you know?"
It's hard for
Yeah.
people. It's hard for people.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that we all talk to that sound great. They look great on paper, but to that point is it's hard. I mean, life happens. We all know that. I have a sick kid at home today. Life happens, right? But it's one of those you gotta push forward in certain areas, and that's what Nintendo Switches and iPads and all that stuff is for, right? And again, life happens, and people understand that. Like, hey, I missed our call. So you pick up the phone and you call them, you send a text message, send an email. It's too easy to communicate with people this day and age to say it's not the right fit, or I didn't get to this. Let me save you your time. And to your point, like you're going to be looking at this as though you'll be a business owner. What will you do when your clients miss an appointment or they don't show up for something or something else is missed? And again, it just goes back to their actions. Their actions are going to teach you every single thing you need to know. So when it's time to book a discovery day, if they don't book a plane ticket, but they're telling you all the right stuff, they're still not booking the plane ticket. Well, what does that tell you? They're not ready for this, or they're not going to do this. So, again, in experience, we've all kind of seen a lot of things come and go up and down here, but process shows you everything. And then actions in that process show you who you should be spending your time with.
Yeah, and I found that your volume of lead flow depends on uh your motivation to hang on to leads that are less than stellar. If
Yeah.
you have an abundance of leads, then you're just like, I don't have time, and you focus on who's moving forward fastest. And if you have a lack of leads, you're in lead starvation, then you over follow up with
Yeah.
lesser qualified leads just because you don't have anything else. And so that's something for people to think about with their actions is, do you have enough leads to find the right people, or are you trying to squeeze everybody through because you need it to happen?
There was an old joke that if you're lonely, call a franchise salesperson. They'll talk to you, and it's kind of a funny story. But even to that franchisor, that franchise sales individual has a very small lead pool. They still have to follow the process, and you've got to hold them to that process because we've had it happen to us with this company. We've had individuals say, "Gosh, they're saying all the right stuff." We're like, "Yeah, but they've moved a decision date 3 different times at their request, and they're still not giving you a decision. It's not going anywhere." Well, I'm still going to call. I'm still going to call. I'm still going to call. And you're like, no, they're not going to. It's not going to happen. But they just want to hold on to that lead because they're saying all the right stuff. They're not doing all the right stuff, right? Whereas that busy person's like, just get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out. Let's focus on the ones that are focused on trying to say yes right now, which is really good to do. And you've got to have that mentality of, you know what, so and so just missed their phone call at 1 p.m. I'm on to the next. I'm not going to sit here and dwell on it. I got to focus on moving forward. And I get excited when people miss phone calls because I get an hour back. Like, this is great. Thank you. Never talking to you again. No problem. I'm on to the next person or the next item that I have on my list. because as a business owner, you've got to get to that next item, and that's typically what happens. So
Yeah, I have found from interviewing people since about 2007 that the wealthiest, most successful people I've ever interviewed, they talk short and they have less time and they want to get to whatever you need to get to and then get off the phone onto the next thing because they have less time to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But the people who hold you on the phone and won't get off the phone usually are people who are kind of broke. They don't have anything going on, and you might potentially be that lifeline. They don't know what to do with you yet, but you might be that lifeline that might bring them something. And so they want to stay on the phone with you as long as possible. And I start getting a little nervous sometimes if someone is just continuously talking and they have nothing going on, or they want to call all the time as a client. They just need a buddy. They're not looking to buy a business, or they're not looking to make things happen. Have you noticed that?
I have. I mean, our most valuable asset, everybody that we all talk to, everybody we interact with, is our time, right? Our time is our most valuable asset. And you've got to spend your time where you've got actions that are showing you where to spend your time, right? And so the ones that are just saying all the right stuff, don't really have much going for themselves, they're not going to buy anything. And that's hard for a lot of people because, gosh, they filled out an application form. They look great on paper. That doesn't mean anything, right? That just gives you enough to know if they qualify for something. So again, with time being our most valuable asset, you've got to spend it where people are going to be the most effective for you and showing you through their actions if they are worth your time. And that's hard. It is, but it's something that you kind of learn over the years that, gosh, they're saying the right stuff, but these guys are doing the right stuff. So it just comes back down to their actions again, because we've all had them before where they say all the right stuff, but they just don't do it. We've had multi-unit franchisees that we worked with who own different businesses who I'm doing it, but then they don't. And then they miss phone calls. And you're like, gosh, you own 15, 20 pizza locations and you want to get out of that. We're a solution for you, but you're missing phone calls. You come to a discovery day, but you're not willing to move forward on things. So you kind of just start to see, where do we spend our time and where do we not? So it's a big
Right.
one.
Well, thing is, we're running out of time for this call, but I have so many more questions for you. I would like to ask you another one here, which is, what do you think are the biggest, because the responses we're getting when we're talking to people and they're engaging with us or not engaging with us,
Mhm.
and their actions don't match their words, there are some objections or concerns that are happening that are
Mhm.
kind of steering them, right?
Yeah.
What do you think are some of these bigger, unmentioned concerns that are holding people back? Maybe especially even if they're a valid candidate. Maybe they're valid, but there's this thing that we haven't addressed yet, and that will kind of free people up to move forward.
There's always going to be outside noise. And I think you have to address that up front. You're going to have, and think Ferris Bueller. Oh, you're looking at such and such business from a family member or a neighbor. Gosh, my best friend's brother's sister's girlfriend's friend at 31 Flavors passed out. His dad owned one and he failed miserably at that. Well, that's got nothing to do with what we're talking about and what this process is, right? So I think people have to address outside noise up front to say, let us teach you our process. Let us show you who we are and how we build a business, because people are going to tell you this isn't the right fit. People are going to say, why would you do something like that? Well, it's not for them, it's for you. And so you've got to identify on those first few phone calls, what are their motivations? Why are we on the phone? And this is an old sales trick, right? It's a, how do we identify something for why they're on the phone with us? Is it a bad boss? Is it they want more vacations? They want more time with their family? So you can kind of come back to, hey, remember when we talked about this? This was something that can get you back in front of your family more, get you more family vacations, or get away from that boss that just treats you poorly. So I think you've got to figure out what those motivations are in those first few phone calls or those first few steps to help these people know, like, hey, I'm looking at this for a reason. Someone's going to have something to say, but we more importantly want to make sure that they make an informed business decision, which you can coach them through with your process to help them get away from some of that noise, because it's going to happen. It comes up all the time. But if they're prepared for it up front, they know it's coming. So I think that becomes helpful. That, oh, gosh, Lance talked about this a month ago, and guess what just happened? My next door neighbor, where I was out cutting the grass on here. And it's not a big deal then because they were prepared for it. So I think if you prepare people up front for, here's how we're going to understand what this looks like, here's how your actions during this process are going to show you if you're serious or not. And then some of the anxieties that are going to come up might change some of it, and they're coached up front. It's going to make it that much easier.
Right. And I have always found that if people don't have a vision, something that they have an attachment to, that they're like, I see it, I want it, then having that disappear and seeing all the fears and other things, there's nothing holding them to it because they already have all these worries and concerns that we all have, but they have nothing that they're
Mm.
losing. It's almost like, you know, having like this beautiful meal slid in front of you, and then someone's like, "Oh, that's not for you," and then you're like, "Oh, I kind of wanted that," but
I changed
it's
my
like,
order.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's like, if you don't build that up front in people, there's nothing that they're losing. There's nothing that's holding them to doing this. It's just, it's easy to walk away because of all the distractions in the world. Well,
It is. It is.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you shared. I think everybody listening appreciates everything that you shared today. And I just want to encourage everybody, you can go to the link by this video. That'll get you in connection with Chris. Um, I Again, I can't thank you enough. I would love to spend the next hour asking you more questions, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.